Okay, afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Planning Committee. May I remind everybody present that the meeting will be recorded via the internet and that this recording will be archived for future viewing. So we'll go straight on to business. And item 1 is apologies for absence. Now, Leighton has told me that Margarita has sent her apologies. So that's Margarita, right? Any others? No.
No, nothing. No one else, Chair. No.
Okie doke, thank you. Are we all happy with the minutes of the 4th of November? Are you happy that I sign these?
Yes, propose you sign them.
Thank you very much. Okay, declarations of interest, please.
Yes, Chair. I have a declaration in planning application 2020-00705 full. My father works for the company that is doing the building works. So I will leave the meeting.
Thank you, Leighton. Well, I knew Leighton was going to declare. We've had a previous conversation. So if there are no other declarations of interest, we will move straight onto the agenda. And because of Leighton declaring... Oh, sorry, yes.
Apologies, you got a Councillor Wilson wanted to raise something about the next meeting.
Oh, right. Yes, Margaret.
Hello there.
Councillor Wilson.
Oh, Wilson. Sorry, I thought you said Wilkinson. Mark, yes.
Yeah, I was going to say the next meeting is due to be the 23rd of December, but because the UK government's announcement about relaxing people moving from Wales to UK, I'm thinking of the staff here in particular. I wonder perhaps if we could move that to a better date, being so near to Christmas.
Shall I say we will have a little look at that, Mark, and see what we can do? No guarantees, but we will.
No,
I'm
thinking about the staff.
Yeah,
in particular.
Fully understand that, Mark, and take that on board, and we will let Planning Committee know as soon as we've done whatever it is we can do. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Sorry? Okay, yeah, that moves us on then to agenda item 4. And because of Leighton's declaring on the first application, I'm going to move that one to last. So we're going to do 2019-1177 full Glen Burnie Port Road, Wenvo. And Steve Butler is the officer that's been dealing with this. He's going to run through all the details for us. We have matters arising on it, and we have a speaker on it. So I'll let Steve introduce it, and then I believe it's Mr. Barry Davis is going to speak to us. Steve, over to you.
Yeah, just noted Councillor Driscoll's hand was up. I just wondered whether...
Oh, sorry, missed that. Councillor Driscoll, did you want to say something? No, nothing.
No.
I'm sure.
I think you're on.
Bear with me, Chair. I'm going to have to unmute him. Bear with me. Bear with me, Chair. I have to unmute him.
Councillor Kemp's just arrived as well.
Yeah, you're unmuted now, Councillor Driscoll.
Thank you, Mark. Chair, Leighton Rollins left the meeting because he thought he was.
Leighton hasn't left, Vince. He's there in the background. He knows that we're going to do it last. We've had the conversation. He hasn't left the meeting. He's just
okay. My mistake. My mistake. Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Gordon, the only thing we haven't you've missed is declarations. I'm assuming you don't have any, but just to give you a chance.
Yeah, nothing to declare, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you very much. Just saying now, we've moved the agenda around because Leighton has declared on the first application. So we're doing Glen Burnie first, Gordon, and Steve is just about to introduce it to us. So I'll hand over to Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just on the matters rising notes, sorry about that. We've had just a letter from the planning agent submitting a new plan and also requesting some slight changes to planning conditions, some of them which we've agreed with, some of them we haven't agreed with. And we've also had a further letter of objection from a neighbour, just to point out that the note does actually give the address as Wenvo, but obviously Brooklands Terrace is in fact in Culverhouse Cross. Just wanted to clarify that point. So so the application itself, Vicky will run through the plans. It's for a new care home. The site itself is on the A4050 Port Road, just south of Cairo Lane. It's next to you probably all know, it's next to the roundabout where you've got the Wolston Castle Public House and the Premier Inn. So it's an existing house in a very, very, very large plot. And so the site itself is just a residential curtilage. Most of it is garden. The existing house is located on the southern part of the site. So the application, which has been amended, is for a 70-bed care home with associated works. There are 32 parkings. If we can just go down a bit further, Vicky, just to the elevations. It's a bit slow. There we go. So, so the care home itself is predominantly a two and a half story building. It's a 70-bedroom care home. The width of it, which is along the eastern elevation, is about 81 metres, and the depth is about 46 metres. The ridge heights do vary, as you can see from the plans in front of you. However, the main two-story elements are roughly about 9 metres average at height, and there is one small element at the back that is 11 metres. If we could go, Vicky, just to the plan right at the bottom, which is the coloured plan. In terms of materials and finishes, you might have to zoom in a little bit if you can. That's the rear elevation of the building, but it gives you some idea of sort of the architectural approach. So you've got these gables in render. You've got there's some cladding as also to the elevations, brick detailing, and a lot of detailing as well, breaking up the massing of the building. Sort of setbacks, there's balcony areas, there's projecting elements, pergolas attached to the building. So just very briefly, in terms of the access, if we can perhaps run up to this proposed site plan. The access will utilise the existing access to the site. I think there's a few photos with the brick wall. So that brick wall will be removed and the access will be widened to facilitate two-way vehicle movement. And then within the site, there are 32 parking spaces, as you can see from the site layout. If we can get there. There we go. Parking spaces at the back, 32 spaces, 2 of which will be disabled. It also includes provision of cycle parking and storage and circulation areas as well. So very briefly, I'm obviously happy to answer any discussions on it. The site itself, safe to say, is outside the settlement of Wenvo. If we can perhaps run down to the site photos. The site is outside some of Wenvo, but notably it's outside of the Green Wedge, which is located to the north, and it's also located outside the special landscape area. So really, this site is actually very, very well screened, as set out in the report. So that the view you can see there is a view from the roundabout. And when you do actually see the site, you see it really in context of a very prominent road, and also the Premier Inn. That's the view from the Premier Inn looking back towards the site. So as part of the application, they've gone through a very detailed LVIA. We've had a number of CGIs which are located further down the plans that have been circulated this morning, I believe. And that, for example, is a view from the northern part of Port Road. So the LVIA they've gone through a number of viewpoints where we think the building is visible from, and even from those viewpoints, the majority of the points, it's not visible due to existing screening of hedgerow and trees. So the only points where it would be visible is from the east, which is the shot in front of you, where there's a public right of way. But the views from the south and the north are pretty much screened by existing vegetation, as you can see in view 2 in front of you. So if we can continue just to run down a little bit, Vicky. The only point really where the site is visible is pretty much outside of the site and actually looking in through the existing access. Whereas, as the report quite clearly states, you're viewing it in the context of the roundabouts, and it is quite more of a suburban context, perhaps, than you would be led to believe just by looking at it on plan form. Just very briefly, in terms of highway improvements, the applicants have agreed to provide, which would be part of this 106 contribution, or would be taken out the 106 contribution for crossing point in front of the site to link the site up directly with Wenvo on the other side of Port Road. And also a crossing point over Cairo Lane, which would link into the existing crossing point. So again, it's a bit of an unusual application because again, as I say, it is outside the settlement boundary, but you know, officers have taken the view that the actual impacts are very, very localized. And whilst it is a very, very big building, architecturally they've done quite a lot in splitting the massing up. And generally, in terms of impact on the countryside, we think that the impacts are very, very limited, and really only the change in the character of the site itself, which is only really visible from Port Road and the very, very local area around that. I'll pass back to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. So that leads us to Mr. Barry Davis. Mr. Davis, can you hear us? I think he's just coming.
Making him a panelist now, bear with me.
Yeah, won't be a mo. Mr. Davis, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Right, I think you've spoken to us before at Planning Committee, but you have 3 minutes to speak. Mark will shout when your 3 minutes is up if you haven't finished, and I will cut you off very promptly. Welcome to Planning Committee, and 3 minutes starts from when you're ready, from now, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Barry Davis. I'm a planning consultant at Asprey Planning and agent on this application. Given that the officer's report is comprehensive and supportive, I will try to keep this brief. Castle Oak is an award-winning Welsh company working exclusively in the retirement sector and has built over 200 care homes across Wales and the UK. Having developed care homes in Newport and Cardiff, if successful today, Castle Oak is looking forward to developing this care home in the Vale of Glamorgan. The care home is proposed to be operated by Dormy Care Communities, another Welsh company and an award-winning operator of care homes. Indeed, last year, Dormy Care won the UK Care Home of the Year award for its new care home in Abergavenny. Now, the number of residents aged 85 and above in the Vale is set to double over the next 15 years. And there is a current shortage of nursing beds, which is set to increase significantly over this period. This shortfall will require 5 new care homes to be built in the Vale over the next 15 years. As there hasn't been a purpose-built care home constructed in the Vale for over 20 years, this proposal represents an important step towards meeting that need. In the meantime, smaller, older care homes in the Vale are increasingly at risk of closure, as evidenced by the closure of the old Rectory care home in Wenvo in 2016. This shortfall in nursing beds means self-funding, lifelong residents of the Vale may have no option but to live out their final years outside of the county, away from their home and their family. To address this need, it is proposed to construct a new state-of-the-art care home on this site at the edge of the settlement. The development has been informed by extensive pre-application engagement with your officers and public consultation with the local community, including a day-long consultation event held in the village hall and a presentation to the community council. We found the overwhelming majority of the local community are very supportive of the proposal. The proposed care home will see an investment of over 10 million and will create around 95 full and part-time jobs for Wenvo and the surrounding area. And Castle Oak has also agreed to make a financial contribution of over £87,000 towards sustainable transport. The project is costed and funded, and Castle Oak and Dormy Care are ready to deliver this site and help address the need for nursing care beds in the Vale. Finally, I would like to express my thanks to Stephen, Victoria and the rest of the team for their engagement and diligence throughout this application. And I would kindly ask members to concur with their recommendation to approve the application subject to a legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Well within your 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, any points of clarification there that we need to ask Mr. Davis? I don't see anybody asking for clarification. There's nothing on the chat. So thank you, Mr. Davis. We will cut you off now and go into our debate. Thank you very much. And as a local member, I feel I've got the right to start on this one. And I can say without doubt, there is, well, I have had no people come to me and complain about this development. I've had an awful lot of people welcome it. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more. I would have liked to have seen a lighted crossing point come out of the development on the 4050, but our planners and our highway engineers have looked at it in great depth, and it is a very busy, complicated piece of road with the bus lane and some strange cambers and whatever. And unfortunately, we just couldn't. It would cost so much money to do. It's out of the question at the moment. So a little bit of disappointment there, but I do welcome the care home. As Mr. Davis said, we lost our one and only care home in Wenvo 4 years ago. So this will be very welcome, and jobs are always very welcome. It's highly sustainable. It's on a main bus route with regular buses daily. So I'd like to think a lot of staff will actually use sustainable modes, and hopefully a lot of the staff will come from the locality and be able to walk to work. So that's me. I'm very much in favour of this development. Anybody else got any comments or questions, please? Yes, Neil Thomas.
Yeah, like you, I think it's a much needed development. I didn't know the Rectory Road one had closed. The Rectory one had closed rather, but there was a really nice home as well. I'm surprised. But yes, there is a need for more accommodation for elderly citizens. Although I would have preferred to have seen it more urban than suburban or countryside for accessibility and the rest of it. But I understand the argument within the report about the cost of land and so on in towns, making it more attractive for house builders rather than people building this sort of thing, which makes it more exclusively expensive for people wanting to build this kind of development. I note also that there is mention within the report about planting with a view to the ecology of the site. I was concerned until I came across that conditioning that you know they could be planting for decoration rather than for ecology. But I note that that is part of the proposal, and I welcome that. I think it's a really good move. I also note the 106 money you're going to be getting, John. That's a good move as well. But yeah, I'd like to move officers' recommendations, please.
Thank you, Neil. I've got Ian wants to talk next, and if anybody else wants to talk, please wave at me. But Ian, next, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking for some quick clarification from officers. As this, just going back a couple of years, so this isn't a candidate site within the local development plan. I remember on multiple occasions during the development of the LDP, I raised the lack of older people's accommodation that was included in there. I'm just clarifying whether we made any provision for older people's accommodation within the LDP, and how this fits within our LDP setup. Also, I agree with people. It's very sad that the old rectory closed. Obviously, that was a couple of months after a disappointing CSSIW report. I don't know what effect that had and what effect that has on the wider provision that this refers to. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, Margaret, I see you there, but Vicky's going to come in and answer Ian's questions, and then Margaret Wilkinson will come in after that. So, Vicky, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Just to address the LDP points, can you all hear me okay? Yeah, I can see some nods, good. It may well have come forward as a candidate site. I wouldn't know without checking. So it could have come forward as a candidate site for any number of things, but it wasn't. That didn't transpire into anything. It's not allocated for anything in the local development plan. you know, it is countryside as the report sets out. And in terms of specifically addressing older persons accommodation, the LDP is not specific in that regard. And I think that is something that when we come into plan review, which we will commence next year, I think we will need to look at again. There isn't anything specifically in Planning Policy Wales or national guidance that directs you to do that through your development plan process, but it is quite a common theme for us here in the Vale that gets raised, you know, in relation to one-off dwellings as well, and succession, you know, families wanting elderly parents to come and live with them and those sort of issues. And I think we will need to grapple with them through our plan review and evidence base. So I thank you, Councillor, for raising the issue, and I'd like to give some assurance that we will be considering that in the next plan. But for now, we have to deal with them through the development management process, as we are in this one, taking a slightly more pragmatic and flexible approach than perhaps the LDP would strictly set out for us.
Thank you, Vicky. Margaret, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I will second Neil Thomas's movement, but I've got to say there is a real good bus route there. I mean, every half an hour from Cardiff, every half an hour from Barry, and then we get odd ones from down the Vale going through about every hour. So I think it's a good site, and it is people be able to get there quite easy. So I will second that.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question or make a comment? If there's not, I will ask you, Andrew Parker.
Only just to compliment the scheme and compliment the officers again, because the fact that we've managed to discuss this over a quarter of an hour, very impressed with the landscaping scheme too, whoever did that. So
it was something that we really pushed for. So rather than having these CGI showing how a site will look, we said, well, you've got to sort of match your CGI up with you know, actual planting to ensure that it's delivered. So we went back and forth with our landscape architect to secure the scheme, and you know, we had 3 or 4 revisions on it. And it's quite a complicated one as well, because the landscaping scheme needs to be future proofed in case there is the cycleway footway going along the frontage of the site. So effectively what you're going to get initially are two green boundaries, just to future proof it. So you know, the certainly landscaping scheme is very, very high quality, as you can see from the submission.
Yeah, and the good news is the poor old ash dieback trees, which are shown on the photographs now, which won't be there, have been replaced with more appropriate species. But no, it sets a high standard, and you know, let's hope other people follow it.
Thank you, Andrew. Vicky, yes.
I just wanted to remind you, Chair, that the matters arising do make amend the officer's recommendation to include a whole number of changes to conditions. So if we can just be clear, I'm assuming that is what the move is for, officer's recommendation including those matters arising changes. That's all.
I will clarify that now with Neil, and Neil has put his thumb up and he's happy. And Margaret, who seconded, are you happy? Yes, Margaret's got her thumb up as well. Excellent. So is there anybody who is likely to want to abstain or vote against this? That being taken, then, can I all ask you if you would agree that we all go with a unanimous decision on officer's recommendation, please? No one is going crazy. I've got lots of thumbs going up. I will take it that is passed with officer's recommendation on a unanimous vote. Thank you all very much. Now then, I see Leighton's picture pop up. I need to make sure that Leighton has left, and I'm just looking down my list, but I think he has left now. Am I right, Mark, saying Leighton has left the meeting? Yeah.
Yes, that's right, Chair.
Yeah, okay. So that brings us on then to the workshop, Robbins Lane, and it's 2020-00705 full. Vicky is going to run through this. There are matters arising again on this, and we do have a public speaker. So Vicky will introduce it to us. We will then go to Mr. Andrew Knight, who is the public speaker. and Mr. Knight will have his 3 minutes then. But Vicky first, and then we'll go to Mr. Knight. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. I can't see you anymore, so you'll have to shout at me if you can't. Just to draw your attention to the matters arising then first, it's just further comments from Councillor Neil Moore, who called in the application, just to make his position clear that he's disappointed that the application is a retrospective one and thinks that such matters should always come to committee for consideration, and drawing committee's attention to the concerns that have been raised by residents, which are obviously set out in the report, and I'm sure we'll hear some more in the public speaking as well. So if I can just give you a bit of a summary of the application. It is a retrospective application, but it follows a previous application for largely similar works that was relating to the existing workshop. So it's an established lawful use here for sort of car repairs and garage workshop use. And the previous permission, and therefore also this retrospective permission, sought to change the first floor of the coach house that you can see as the red brick building shown in the plans, to use that first floor as a cafe type use, and then to make some alterations to the workshop building itself. This retrospective application seeks to resolve the fact that the works were carried out slightly differently to the approved plans, and to regularise that by dealing with this application. You can see from the photographs, the easiest thing to show you really is the photograph of what has been built. So what had previous permission was a continuous flat roof along these premises. What's been built is a flat roof, hopefully you can see it in the picture here, that is slightly higher, certainly on the road frontage, than was shown on the approved plans for the previous one. And you can see from these photographs, hopefully members have had a chance to review these today, because we've also put in here photographs taken from the neighbour, who I believe is about to speak as well. So this is the photo of the development as it currently appears, so you can see the cladding. It was brought to our attention whilst it was under construction, and you can see from the earlier photograph of it being under construction. At first it was finished with rather untidy looking corrugated sheeting. You can see in the photographs I'm showing on the screen now, which obviously we raised concerns with because of the appearance of those looking quite unsightly. So we think it's an improvement now in terms of what they had originally built it as, and we think in terms of its visual appearance, we think it's now acceptable with the cladding that it's now been finished in. The main issue really, I think members probably need to consider, and I'm sure we'll hear from the neighbours, is really this impact on the neighbours. Primarily this one, where we stood in the garden, having the photograph of it here, in terms of its visual impact, whether it's overbearing or unneighbourly. And the report obviously addresses that and does come to the conclusion that we think the impact is acceptable. And that's for members to consider further, really. So I think it's probably best if I leave it there. I'll stop sharing and I'll let the public speaker go next, I think.
Okay, thank you, Vicky. Mark, could we invite Mr. Knight in, please?
This has been made a panelist now, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Hello, Mr. Knight, can you hear us?
I can indeed, assuming you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear. Just to give you a bit of protocol, I dare say Mark has discussed this with you previously, but as a public speaker, you will have 3 minutes to put your case. Mark will shout when your 3 minutes is up, and I will cut you off fairly promptly. If you could hang on then after that, we will ask our committee if they need anything that you have said clarified. And once we've heard from you, we'll then go on to discuss the matter and make our decision. So if you're ready, Mr. Knight, I will hand over to you and you will have 3 minutes.
If I may, before the 3 minutes start, because I was muted earlier, I do need to declare an interest. It doesn't relate to this business, but I'm a chair of Taff Housing Association, which is a registered social landlord and also a partner with the Vale of Glamorgan on some services, not housing. I'm also an independent consultant in the field of HR, but I'm working for Cardiff Community Housing, who are also a partner with the Vale of Glamorgan. Whilst it has no impact on this particular matter, I wanted to declare that up front.
That's fine, thank you for that. So are you ready to go?
Certainly am.
Right, over to you then. Mark, if you could start your timer, please.
So I suppose the main issue for me is, having listened to Victoria's report, and I don't mean to do a disservice to officers, frankly, they're wrong. The report says there's no impact on me and my home. And I must say that this is not a rental or an investment home. There aren't many of those in Cadoxton anyway, I'm sure. But this is my forever home. This is somewhere I've lived for 20 years and plan to carry on living. And the impact of this this extension to the height of the building is remarkable. So in the letter that I sent to officers, you can clearly see that the roof height has gone from 2 meters to a height of 3. So that's 50% higher than it was before. And whereas a fence at the back of my property obscured the garage previously, which was in stone block, you can now see clearly from the photos that both officers and I have sent in that it's significantly higher than the fence. The net impact on me is that light into my garden, which again the report says is not impacted, is materially impacted. So I've sent a fairly extensive document, which I presume members have read prior to today's meeting. If I highlight the key points for me, essentially, the original plans and the original granted application did not make it clear that the roof height flat all the way along was going to be increased. There were no measurements on the plan. So when I commented on the previous plan, it wasn't even clear that that was the case. Work was carried out to then increase the height of the roof, which was contrary on the front elevation, at least to the granted application. And there have been several visits by enforcement. And perhaps in contrast to your colleague who was describing the care home, no community engagement took place from the owner of the property, no consultation with residents and tenants. And frankly, we were just treated as if we didn't matter. And many of my neighbours have lived here for 40 years. There is a material impact on the enjoyment of our garden, and the aspect is kind of west-northwest. So, I suppose listening to Mr. Rowlands talk about there was no impact when he came to do the visit, it was difficult because he's come in November, whereas in the summer months it's more pronounced. But he said he followed an algorithm or some kind of sum to work that out. I'd like to see those workings. No one has actually explained to me how you guys judge that the impact is not material when I live here, and I'm telling you that it definitely is, but apparently on paper it isn't. And for me, there's a material change to the property itself. So whilst on paper the usage that property is for hasn't changed, it's still a garage. By increasing the height of the roof, you've actually materially changed the kind of work that happens in the business. So whilst on a technicality, perhaps I'm wrong here, but you're now servicing vehicles, louder, noisier equipment, more in-depth work, and we're already seeing an impact on the public highways with noise, and just generally the operation of that garage is now different than it used to be, which all impacts me as a resident. And you can imagine that during coronavirus, when particularly during the lockdown period, we were all stuck at home, that had an exaggerated impact as all this was happening. And I suppose my other concerns are more environmental, but we already have a problem with rats and rodents in the area, partly because of takeaways and partly because of the proximity of a brook. I see no evidence.
Chair, the 3 minutes are up.
I'll pause there.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Knight, but it is a strict 3 minutes. If you can just hang on there for a mo, just while I ask if any of our committee members have any points they would like clarified from your... No, I don't see anything. No hands up, no, nothing on the chat. No. Okay, thank you, Mr. Knight. We will cut you off now. You'll still be able to continue to watch us, but you won't be able to speak to us. And we'll open our debate up then. I think I'll go to Vicky now, ask her if she would like to comment on what Mr. Knight has said, and then I will take questions from the members. Vicky, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As I said in my introduction, I think the primary issue really is in terms of the impact here on Mr. Knight and his adjoining neighbours, albeit I think his property is identified in the report as being the most affected because it's along the entirety of his boundary, this increase in height. And the report sets out the considerations that we think about when we're looking at those impacts. I didn't want to give the impression, I hope I haven't given the impression, and neither is the officer's report, that there is no impact on the property, because clearly there's an increase in height. And Mr. Knight referred to it being going from 2 meters previously to 3 meters now. And that is clearly visible not only from his garden, but from the windows in the rear of his house, and that has an effect. The key issue for us to consider is whether or not that effect is so unreasonable as to be unneighbourly, but also having to regard to what is the norm in these kind of residential environments, what's allowed by a permitted development, for example, in terms of extensions or outbuildings within gardens. So the report considers things like outbuildings and extensions being allowed to similar heights as this along the boundary, and many people will have that experience where that is simply permitted development and doesn't require planning permission, and it would have a similar effect as what the height of this building at 3 meters would be. I think the way in which it has been finished obviously is a lot better than what was there originally, and helps with the sort of outlook issues. The technical report that was being referred to was the planning officer's assessment of the impact on light. I do not have that detail to hand, and it is very technical in nature. We don't normally discuss such technical matters in committee. The conclusion from that is that the impact is not unacceptable. We're having regard to the orientation of the property. So the building, as explained in the report, is going to affect the evening light because of the orientation, and there will be some impact from an increase in height, but it would be when the sun is already fading and setting during the summer months. So it's fair to say there will be some impact, but the assessment is whether or not those impacts are so unacceptable as to warrant the refusal of planning permission. And obviously we've come to the conclusion that we don't think that's the case. So I think I'm happy to just take questions as and when if members got any concerns.
Well, lovely. Thank you very much, Vicky. Have we any questions, comment, or yes, Councillor Neil Thomas?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I did put a question on chat. Basically,
yes,
there doesn't seem to be any access for people with disabilities to this cafe. So is it actually a legitimate form of development anyway?
I'm sure we'll get an answer to that from Vicky.
Yeah, it's it is relevant to consider access, but firstly I would say the change of use for the cafe has already been permitted and granted under the previous planning application. To a certain extent, it's a moot point here. But bearing in mind that it was an existing building and that the cafe use was going to be in the first floor, almost ancillary, you can expect that customers, while they're waiting for their car or tyres to be done, will sit in the cafe and have a cup of coffee. Businesses under the Disability Discrimination Act have a duty to make reasonable adjustments. So you would expect if a person was unable to reach the first floor, you'd expect the business to bring coffee to them at ground floor or have an alternative seating arrangement downstairs. But ultimately, when a proposal is for a use of a first floor, you're always going to have a challenge, particularly when it's an existing building which is particularly constrained. You wouldn't expect a lift, for example, to be installed in this kind of environment. So I'm not sure it's particularly relevant to this application, but it's a fair comment in general.
Thank you, Vicky. I'm sure Neil is happy with that. Margaret, you would like to come in, Margaret Wilkinson?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to know when those photographs were taken, because I'll tell you what, you sometimes can't even move on that road. There is a shop across the road from there. There is tyres on the pavement and people are trying to get round the tyres. The other day when I passed, and it took me 2 minutes to get to the one part, and then I had to wait 5 minutes for traffic to move. There was people working on a car in the middle of the road, on the side of the road, not in the middle, on the side. Now, I am not happy about this at all. I'm not happy about the size of the garage anymore or the coffee shop. I am really concerned about it.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Vicky, did you want to comment on any of the points Margaret makes?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Mike Clogg is available in the meeting. He might want to comment about the working on the highway, if that's happening, and what highway rights there aren't to do that. In terms of the parking impact, I mean, this is an established lawful use, so we can't be considering the parking impacts of the existing business or how that operates, and we see a lot of problems around garages and things like this in constrained urban sites, but we can't alter the fact that it's got a lawful use for this activity to happen. The parking impacts of the cafe were considered when we previously determined that application and approved it. And again, I don't think it's appropriate to revisit that through this application because that has been established as being acceptable. Having said that, as I pointed to, I think the majority of customers are likely to be customers that are there, accompanying their car, having work done to it, or potentially customers arriving on foot and walking there locally. Obviously, if there's congestion in terms of parking locally, people will drive on to somewhere else. I should imagine there's plenty of places to get a cup of tea or coffee in Barry. So if they can't find a parking spot, I should imagine they'll move on. But those matters were primarily addressed in the previous application, and I don't think it's appropriate for us to revisit them now here. I don't know if Mike is there. Perhaps he'll shout up if he is.
Yes. Yeah. Coming on now.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. I'm not that familiar with the area, but certainly and I've only just caught the sort of tail end of the conversation, but any obstructions or any materials left on highway, we would certainly want to take or want to investigate and take appropriate action over. And I will arrange for one of my inspectors to visit the location over the next couple of days to have a look and see what's happening there. And as I say, we will take appropriate action if there is any materials on highway.
Thank you, Mike. Very, very much. I think that'll please Margaret on that. Yes, Margaret, you'd be happy with that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be happy with them looking, but some days it's clear, other days it's not. But not only that, I'm not happy with the traffic because I'll tell you what, it's on a bend. There is a shop opposite, and the shoot out of the side of that road, some of them, and there's a bus sometimes goes along there, and I'll tell you what, I think since they've made it bigger, it's dangerous.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure Mike's inspectors, when they pop along, will perhaps have a quick safety review of the area, and maybe perhaps you could come back to Margaret and copy committee in with that, Mike, if that's possible, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get my traffic team to have a look at the area as well. I'll perhaps get some additional details off Vicky just to make sure I've got the area correct, so that when we do go out, we know what we're looking at. Because apologies, I was only vaguely listening to the conversation before you asked for comments. But yeah, sure, we'll certainly investigate the concerns being raised by Councillor Wilkinson. Both from anything on the footway causing obstruction or from a traffic safety perspective, not a problem at all.
Lovely, thank you very much, Mike. Councillor Johnson, you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to, I suppose actually it's probably following on from some of what Councillor Wilkinson has said, just clarification from the planning officer about the exact lines of the discussion that we can have, because what I think Councillor Wilkinson was referring to, whether it's the the lawful use of the building or the A3 use was actually agreed in a previous application, which wasn't called in by the local members to this committee. So that's already done and dusted, and those issues are a matter for enforcement and for checking out that they're operating properly. And so the issue that we've got here is really actually quite tightly drawn, which is about the height of the building or the extension that's been put on there. Could the planner also just clarify what actually is in the Anavantol? I can't remember the English for that. What's actually the what are the contours for discussion here? Because it feels there's a lot of issues around here which were actually dealt with in the previous application, which wasn't called into us and we haven't dealt with, we haven't seen, and what are we actually dealing with here today? Thank you, Chair.
I'm sure Vicky will enlighten us.
Yeah, I think you've summarised it pretty well there, Councillor. You know, the change of use to the cafe was previously considered and previously approved. It is included within this application, but it needn't be because it's already got that planning permission, and that's you know, that's the fallback. And certainly, I would be very concerned about members making a decision to refuse the change of use of the cafe, which has previously been considered as acceptable by the local planning authority. It was determined by officers under delegated powers. It wasn't called in at the time. So, you know, it really is a bit of a moot point to discuss the merits of the change of use to the cafe. Similarly, the lawful use of the workshop as a workshop, that's well established. And again, we can't reconsider the acceptability of that or otherwise. So the key issue here is the difference in terms of what was approved previously, and there were works to the roof shown there. And it may be helpful if I bring up those approved plans. If you bear with me, I will try and share my screen.
While you're doing that, Vicky, I will say that I have seen that Pam Drake and Eddie Williams want to come in after Vicky finished.
So you can see here from the previous plans, there was already an increase in the roof, you know, shown. You can see there the height of the roof relative to the windows in the property. Hopefully members can make that out, but you can see it was all one long flat roof. Though you know, there is some ambiguity here because the site is not flat, and you know, there is potentially a difference in levels at the back of the site compared to the front. And when enforcement officers went to investigate the matter, when it was brought to our attention what was being built, didn't appear to accord with the plans. Certainly, the part of the flat roof closest to the coach house on the road side did appear to be higher than as shown on these plans, but it was, you can see the height of it relative to the windows shown on that plan in front of us. And if we compare that, I can try and share the photographs of what's been built on site. Hopefully members can see that, you know, the roof is just under those windows. So the difference is relatively minor in terms of that height compared to what was on the previous approved plans. It clearly wasn't built in accordance with the approved plans because you can see here quite clearly it steps up the building, and that's not what was shown on the previous plans. And so this application is to regularise what's been built because it doesn't accurately reflect what was shown on the plans, but they are relatively minor changes when you consider what's previously been granted. Hopefully that clears it up.
I think
Chair,
that does.
can I just ask if Vicky would be able to give a statement on permitted development, just and what the limits of that are within this context? Sorry, Chair, just I think that's relevant to this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the permitted development rights for industrial type uses like this are going to be far more limited than normal domestic permitted development rights. I think the officer's report draws our attention to what is permitted development for householders, because that is the typical relationship on garden boundaries and next to residential properties. You normally have two houses next to each other, and what they are permitted to do under permitted development rights is relevant, we think, because there is a presumption that what is allowed under permitted development is acceptable in planning terms. That's why Welsh Government has you know, allowed those permissions. So the fact that you can build an outbuilding, apologies, I don't deal with permitted development inquiries on a day-to-day basis, so I'm going to just quickly draw on the officer's report here. So for example, they talk about ground floor extensions are permitted up to 3 metres in height for up to 4 metres in length where they are directly adjacent to the boundary. And there are also permitted development rights for outbuildings as well, again, to similar heights. So the point being, 3 metres in height is not particularly considered to be an intrusive height, given that actually it's very close to what you can do for permitted development. Obviously, we're used to fence enclosures being 2 metres in height. Buildings are allowed to be a little bit higher again, and pointing to the fact that there is a bit of a gap here, a 1.2 metre gap from the boundary of the residential properties to the building that's been increased in height as well, which again has been taken into account when considering the acceptability of it.
Okay, thank you, Vicky. Just before we go on any further, Mr. Knight, I must ask you to stop sending messages. You're not allowed at this stage to have any input, further input into planning committee. I will remind planning committee members to ignore these messages because it is not part of planning protocol. And Mr. Knight, if you continue to send messages, we will cut you off completely. Now, Ian, are you happy with that? Is that you done for a mo? Lovely, thank you very much. I've got Pam Drake next, and then I believe Eddie Williams wants to come in after that. So Pam, over to you, please.
I know we've moved on a bit now, but I just wanted to support what Margaret said. I use this road on a regular basis, and it can be an absolute nightmare in the middle of the day. I came through there at 1 o'clock this afternoon. There was a row of cars outside the garage. There was nobody actually working on them at the time. But what annoys me is they got all new tyres all along the footpath. Now, how much space is left for people to walk on there? I don't know. And there's a lot of children that walk up there to go to school and everything. And I'm really concerned that I don't think they should have to have their brand new tyres on display on the footpath. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not happy about it.
No, Pam, I fully understand that, and Margaret, and I think Mike is going to have a little look at that. This is an enforcement thing rather than a planning thing, and I'm sure he'll update us as and when, and it's the kind of thing that we can kind of deal with after the planning application as well. It's not dependent on this application. So I'll go to Eddie next.
Understand. Yeah.
Sorry. I'll go to Eddie next, and then I see Andrew Parker indicating. Eddie, over to you. You're muted, Eddie, still. No.
Sound is on, Chair.
How are you doing, Eddie? No. Can you send him a mute request or something, or an unmute request?
He's unmuted, Chair. There's something wrong with the sound. So maybe if Councillor Williams puts it in the chat.
Yeah, Eddie, could you pop something in the chat? I'll go to Andrew and then come back and see if we can speak to you in a minute or two. Andrew, you wanted to come in.
Only really to get a little bit of clarification on the size of the coffee shop, which I mean, I've looked at it at the moment and it seems to be about less than 3 meters by 6 meters, so it's very small. I mean, under current regulations, you wouldn't get more than half a dozen people. But my view is that really it is only for local people, because it's only likely to serve 12 covers in it.
Yeah, but as we discussed, Andrew, this really, although it is part of this planning application, it was granted planning application for a coffee shop earlier on. And it is designed for their clients, I'm guessing, not really general public. So hence no disabled access and stuff. But can we see if Eddie can come back in? Eddie, are you able to speak to us now? No.
He's asking to move the recommendation, Chair.
Eddie, I will accept your move of recommendations and I will second that. Is there anybody else that would like to talk on this application before I'm going to take a vote on this, because I guess it's not straightforward. So I'll run through the voting on this, which I'm going to do. So I'll start at the top with me, and I am saying I'm voting for the recommendation. I will ask Councillor Gray.
4 off the recommendations.
Thank you. I will ask Councillor Birch.
For the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cave.
For the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Drake.
Against.
Thank you very much. Councillor Driscoll.
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges.
Against, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Against the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Rowlands as declared. Councillor Neil Thomas.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Margaret Wilkinson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Eddie Williams. Thumbs up or down, Eddie? Thumbs up. Thank you. Councillor Mark Wilson.
Against the application.
Thank you. And Margarita Wright is not here, so that's it. That is clearly carried. If you want to know the numbers, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 4, and 5. So that is carried. That then brings us to the end of our agenda, because I don't have any urgent items. Is somebody trying to say something to me, or is it just a bit of feedback? No, bit of feedback. So no items for agenda item 5, no urgent part 2s. I thank you all for attending this planning committee and look forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you. Mark, if you can stay on for a sec. Oh, Margaret wants to come in. Did you, Margaret? No, just waving. Thank you. Mark, if you could stay on for a sec, just 2 minutes when everybody's gone.
Okay, Chair.
Mark Thomas, I assume.
Yes, sorry, yes. Sorry, yes.
Thank you, Chair. See you later.
Yes, thank you, Ben. Thank you. Yeah, Mark, just to say,